Hey watch friends, today we're going to take a look at an all-new offering from Zelos, but this is of a familiar model. This is the Mako, but now back for the first time in a GMT form. This is going to be exciting to get through in that we have a new movement debuting for the brand, as well as a new dial material and some other highlights. This particular variant we're looking at today is the limited edition that's exclusive to their Facebook Timekeepers group. Additionally, I do want to mention, in case you saw that banner there, they did send this watch into the channel for review and I don't have to send it back, so I want to be upfront about that. Before we dive into the model, let's go ahead and take a quick look at the packaging. I say quick though, because I've already actually recorded a detailed review of the new packaging in the Hammerhead Titanium video that was delayed, so that will be coming up soon, so stay tuned for the unboxing there. I am absolutely loving this new Zelos packaging. They just have a basic cardboard box on the outside, and you can see their new branding there, as well as the website. But then as you open that up, this is where you get to the good stuff. Inside, you can see the warranty card now has its own separate section to store that. But this is the big thing. They now are offering a 3-watch roll that, as we'll look at in Hammerhead unboxing here, Hammerhead Titanium unboxing, this is comparable to the Mirage Luxury in many respects. So you've just got snap closures there. You can see blue on the outside, orange on the inside, but then this has 3 slots, and this is actually slotted in there instead of button clasp, which that's what I love about it. This one, though, does have a finger type design to it, so you can actually compress it for smaller wrist, as well as it does expand for larger wrist. So fantastic choice, and it's hard to believe that you're actually getting this included with the watch. Great travel option there. Alright, now that we have a better feel for how it ships, let's get to the good stuff and take a deep dive into this model, see what it's like to live with. But first, let's go ahead and get through the basic specs. This case is actually coming dead on at 40 millimeters, but that's measured from roughly the 2 to 8 for reasons we'll talk about with the kind of flow out of the case shape there. The bezel steps down just a hair. It on my calipers is coming in at 39.9 millimeters, so accordingly, it's pretty much flush with the case. The lugs are a strap change friendly 20 millimeters, and all these specs are going to be very similar to the Mako V3 that we've looked at previously, and that's also dropping in this. The lug to lug is coming in at 46.1 millimeters, so plenty versatile there. The male end links though on this, I did go ahead and measure those. That kicks this out to 52.5 millimeters, but don't be scared off. We'll see it on my 6.5-inch wrist. It still fits just fine. I actually already own and have reviewed numerous other Makos. The thickness. This one does definitely kick up the thickness. It's coming in at 16 millimeters, but again, don't be scared off because part of that is this crystal. You can see how proudly that sits, so you don't really notice it in wear characteristics. The bezel is also thickened up though, as you can see there. The case, I believe, as we'll see later on, I believe is very similar, if not the same, as the standard Mako. So I believe the thickness is added into that bezel with that undercut, as well as the crystal. That crystal still continues with a double dome sapphire crystal, which does have inner AR coating. As always is going to be the case with double domes, certainly you will still pick up glare and reflection, but I find it to be plenty adequate, though I thought the same was true for the other ones, though I know some people wanted it kicked up. The movement. This is where it gets exciting. This debuts the Miyota 9075. That's an all-new 9 Series movement, or rather a newer 9 Series movement, and it's the first for the brand. It is an automatic movement, just as the other 9 Series. It's still going to be higher beat at 28,800 beats per hour, 42-hour power reserve, hacking, hand winding, all that kind of good stuff. But what makes this exciting? This is actually a true or traveler's GMT. So I'm sure you saw that fourth hand there, and we'll look at that as we go through and actually see the operation thereof. But it's a really cool feature, and this is, I believe, a first for the brand of offering a traveler's or true GMT, and it certainly is the first for that movement. The water resistance is consistent with the others, 300 meters or 30 atmospheres. The weight, size to my 6.5-inch wrist, and this is stainless steel packaging, so your 316L stainless steel for the case, bracelet, etc., is coming in at 167.6 grams. It's really not too bad. Definitely on the heavier side as far as for the middleweight category, but certainly not one that I would call a heavyweight either. It doesn't weigh you down. It's consistent again with the stainless steel Makos. It still feels very similar to that. All right, so now that we have the specs out of the way, let's go ahead and actually take a deeper dive into what it's like to live with this particular variant, look at it across lighting conditions, all that good stuff. But first, the colors. This particular variant at the Mako GMT is going to be dropping in 4 variants. There's the Malachite dial that we're looking at today, which is a real mineral dial. There's additionally a Frost version, which is a really slick configuration there. There's a blue meteorite, again a classic, and that's one that we'll actually be looking at with a blue and yellow combo here in the V3. And then there's additionally a really cool Mosaic. It's a turbine mother of pearl. That actually, we've seen Mosaic in some other executions, but that one's really cool, and I don't even know how they really machine that. That's quite a interesting effect there. Looking specifically though, or particularly at this dial, this is going to be a highly polished, so it has a very glossy surface to it. Almost reminds me of the aventurine surface where that is a glass material, but this is very similar to that polish effect. So you get a lot of that reflectivity that comes into play, but not in a bad way. I really love the way that picks up. Additionally, you're going to have that delicate layering that only comes with a true mineral. So that is something that's really slick about the malachite. I love minerals myself, and I think that's an excellent touch here, and I love looking at that down on my wrist. Additionally, you'll notice subtle pores and different little accents throughout the dial, and again, that's just part of the nature of being a natural material with every dial looking different. This does have an applied logo at the 12 o'clock position. And then at the 6 o'clock position, you're going to have the GMT text in the accent color, in this case yellow, to go with the GMT hand, as well as the water resistance. Kicking out to the chapter ring. So out on the perimeter, many people have noticed that this does have the GMT hours and accordingly dropped the minutes for that. So this does only have your GMT hours that are indicated throughout the chapter ring. At the 6 o'clock position, this does have a date window, just as with the prior variants that we've seen in the past. The hardware. Again, this is going to be consistent with past variants. It's still going to keep the sword style handset. It has the Dauphine crease down the middle, so that adds for nice fastening and light play. In this particular variant, not only is it polished, but it actually is gilt, which I think goes so well with that green. Just gold and green complement each other perfectly, and that's a classic combo. I think that's well chosen. And sticking in a similar coloration but still having differentiation, this does have that yellow GMT hand, and it's a very bold arrow tip that's out there, so it's very easy to see. So this makes it, in many respects, a very practical GMT. We'll come back to the minutes aspect. Looking at the markers, this has at the 12, 3, and 9 position has modified what I would call a modified pentagon. So it does have the pentagon, but it's actually curved at the outer edge, so curved at the top of that. You do additionally, for 12 o'clock, have that shield kind of effect where you have the line breaking that. The rest of them are just going to be circles, with the exception of the semicircle, square, whatever you want to call it, down at the 6 o'clock position. So nice to still have a loom touch, even though this does have the date window. And speaking of loom, as we've seen in past Zelos models, this loom is fantastic. It has C3 as its principal application, but it does have a generous application of BGW9 as well. So you get a nice color play for that. Endurance is great, performance is great, overall glow wow factor is great. Really, as always, Zelos nails the loom, so excellent there. Shifting over to the bezel, this one, with being a GMT, comes with a bi-directional bezel, and it is 48 clicks. We'll listen to that action here momentarily. This one actually has a polished ceramic bezel insert, not something we've seen too much from the brand, and I really like that. I'm a big fan of polished ceramic over sapphire, so I like that aspect a lot. Just like with the past Mako models, this has a wide coin edge for the bezel, but this one though does add undercutting to account for that thickness. So I like the fact that they didn't just make it a huge chunk and they kept that as far as slim characteristics or profile for that to give you kind of the visual feel of slimness. As far as the markers on the bezel insert, you have the pip at 12 o'clock, and then for your odd numbers, you have just your dots, and then you have your even numbers in numerals going around that. Getting back to the bezel. So let's go ahead and check this action. As you can hear there, very tactile click. This is on ball bearings, and you can very much feel that it's on ball bearings. As you go through, it has a lot of presence, a lot of tactile feedback. It does, though, as is almost always the case with bidirectional, does have that little bit of play to it. It's nothing bad, but I just will say the alignment is actually pretty well spot on. You just have to settle it into it. If you leave it and kind of push it, you can push it to either direction and have it look like it's misaligned. So do be aware of that, but I found in my limited usage, because I'm turning this around pretty quickly because of the schedule issues here, I did want to mention that aspect. So in case you feel like it's misaligned, you can ultimately just get that a little nudge and it lines up perfectly. So no real complaints there. Shifting over to the case again is going to be very familiar from the past Mako models. It still has that nice curvature, that nice flow to it, a little bit of a slab kind of effect, but with cut in, so it breaks that up, and that nice downturn flow as well. It is going to be horizontal brushing, running the length of the case, which is always my preference, or almost always my preference. it does have polishing on the underside as well as the top, and we'll look at that further. So I think that breaks it up, and again, adds to the visual feel of some slimness there as well. Shifting over to the lugs, as you come down the lugs, you can see that nice downturn comes right to the case back, and then the actual top side of the lugs, I like the way that they incorporate that cut into there, just gives that visual slimness. So it still has the presence of the wider, but visually just gives that little bit of slimming to it. Between the lugs, you can see this does have the straight cut that we've seen on the prior, so semi-straight across there. So it goes now nicely with bracelet or straps, of course, with the fitted end links here. On the 3 o'clock side, you can see it does have a 4 o'clock crown, which does have an integrated crown guard. So that's where I talked about as far as measurements. If you measure it at the 3 to 9, it will kick out a little wider there, but that just tapers down nicely to the crown itself. As far as the crown, it is a 6.3 millimeter size, and it is a screw-in construction as you'd expect for the dive style. As we already looked at, it's at the 4 o'clock position, and as we saw in the loom footage, it is signed as well as actually loom applied there also, so that's nice. And then the milling is pretty well in keeping with the bezel. It is a thinner cut to that, but it is still going to be a similar pattern for that, and I think ties in nicely, so good aesthetic choice for that one. Shifting over to the case back. The case back on this is a screw-in construction, as again you'd expect for the dive style. It does just have the keyholes on the exterior, which isn't necessarily my preferred. I like them when they're inlaid, but it's not too bad, and I haven't found any hot spots or any issues there. The texture is a combination of blasting as well as brushing across that. Of course, the signature aspect is going to be that Mako. The Mako does not have any of the sharpness that the original batch of Mako V3 did, so as I run my finger across that, no issues there. The outer lip has a little bit of sharpness, but nothing that I feel on wrist, only when I drag my finger across that. The big thing to note, though, is this is specific to the Timekeepers variant, so it is annotated as such, and this is a batch of 400, in case anyone was wondering, for this particular colorway. Shifting over to the bracelet. The bracelet on this, as we've seen in the past ones, is tapered from 20 millimeters at the lugs down to 18 millimeters at the clasp. As with past Makos, it does have male end links, but I think they have a nice flow, and I think it wears well on the wrist, as you can see here. So I really can't complain about that. I think it still has pretty good drape. It doesn't fall, as we'll see in the articulation, completely to the wrist, but it's not too bad. It continues through with the 3-link construction, again, that we've seen in the past. It does have brushing as well as the polished accents down the side. They are using a new bracelet manufacturer, and I'm going to say the fitment seems to be really excellent. They did that change just for slight improvements for it. I can't say it's a dramatic difference, and if I wasn't aware of it, honestly, I don't know how much of it's placebo, but just even putting the links together or sizing it, everything just feels really precision cut together, fits out without any resistance, any issues, everything feels very smooth, like that a lot. Shifting over to the articulation, as you can see, it has pretty sufficient drape overall. As I said, it doesn't fold to the case back, however, it does drape over the finger and then therefore over your wrist nicely, so no real complaints there. Shifting to the clasp. The clasp, as we'll see, this is similar with some past models. This is particularly the Vitesse style for this, and we looked at that on the Spearfish as well that we'll bring back in. But this one is going to be a double pusher construction. As you can see, nice polished accent, pebble finish in the middle there, and then brushing on the outside, and then actually polishing again on the outer edge there. So it's kind of a sandwich there with the brushing. And I really think that breaks it up nicely. As you open this up, it does have a milled construction for that as well. And of course, we saw the signature on the outside. The big thing though is going to be that this is a toeless micro adjust. This is the one that pulls up and actually slides out. So there it is in the full out position. I know many people prefer this aesthetically over the Aurora style with the push button. I personally probably lean towards that a little more, but I will say this is a very clean integration and you really can't tell any difference between that and any of the other links. So I think that's a nice touch. And then getting it back in, just lift that up, slide it in, and then it's locked into place. So that's a nice touch there as well. And I think it's a great clasp. It's really hard to go wrong with any of these toeless Zelos clasps that we've seen. All right, so now that we have all that out of the way, let's go ahead and bring in some of the comps that we've made references to. First, here it is next to, this is a Mako V3. Specifically, this is looking at, I figured this would be good since there's the meteorite coloration here. Gives you an idea of the blue and yellow combo so you can see how that kind of looks. Overall, you can see presence-wise, these of course are going to be very, very similar. They're almost indistinguishable other than the fourth hand when you're looking at them head on. When you shift them over to the side, you can see the cases look very, very similar as well, but you can see certainly you do notice not only the bezel as far as the added thickness there, but you do very much notice that crystal sitting higher with that box edge for that double dome as well. So that just gives you an idea of the profile. I will say this is a little bit deceiving for the thickness. I really don't think it's as thick as it comes across when it's on your wrist overall, so I can't complain there. So let's go ahead and bring in next, this is the Spearfish, and specifically Spearfish GMT. And then you can see very similar styling first. Let's go and get a better look at that so you can see sizing wise how these two stack up and compare. But looking at the bezel, you can see they did a similar action here with increasing on the thickness for that by adding that undercut to the bezel. And then additionally, you can see the clasps are going to be very similar, if not the same, between these two as well. So nice touch there too. So I have been very pleased with those models, but that gives you an idea there as far as a comparison on how this one stacks up since we've had a host of GMTs. Here it is next to a Wise Hitman. This one's coming in at 41 millimeters, so you can see presence-wise, I think they're relatively similar, but that brings in some green coloration there. And then let's get that one slid aside. And then here it is next to the Tusino Shellback. And that gives you an idea here next to another 40 millimeter diver as far as the presence of those two. All right, so now that we have all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and wrap things up with my personal view of the positives, some critiques, as well as the overall summary. First, for the positives, we haven't talked about pricing. I think the value on this is incredible. Not only with the Miyota 9075 that you have, but all the in general fitment that we'll talk about and look at, the execution, the quality, that toolless micro clasp, etc. You're getting all of that, and in this particular variant, that mineral dial for $549, which I think is such a good value, and it's really hard to even find any competitors offering a true GMT for that kind of price point. These do actually even start, though, lower at $529 for some of the options available. So really great there. This, I believe I mentioned, is launching on April 27th. The other variants are going to launch on April 28th. The fit and finish, as I alluded to there, is excellent. You know, I really can't complain about it. The polish is spot on. The brushing is spot on. The fitment, no sharp edges, no hot spots. We've got the quick release that I neglected to mention there on the back of the bracelet. That's nicely incorporated. No hot spots from that either. Really across the board, no complaints. The dial on this particular variant, as well as all of the other GMT and standard dial variants, is just beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. Really love this a lot. This is a little more tame than some of the other mineral variants that are out there, like labradorite and even aventurine for that matter, though that's not mineral, that's glass. But that being said, you know, this I think has a lot of beauty to it, especially as you get it through different lighting conditions, and I've really liked it quite a lot during my time with it. The true GMT, you know, that's something for me, that's not necessarily a huge boon in that I don't really need a true GMT, but I'm glad to have one in the collection, and it's awesome seeing one at this price point. Comfort, we've already talked about, excellent, no hot spots, no issues, great articulation, great drape, fantastic there. And then toolless micro, we've already talked about as well, but I got to specifically call that out because I love those toolless micros. But some of the critiques though, you know, one of the things we already alluded to earlier, and that is the lack of minute markers. That is something for me. I do certainly like the precision legibility as well as the ease of setting the time whenever you do have the minute markers. However, you know, for me, I understand why they did it. It was an aesthetic choice for this to try to keep the chapter ring from being too busy or the dial from being too busy, because they could have added hashes on the dial, and I think that would have been way too much. Or similarly, they could have added it to chapter ring, but with having those GMT numerals on there, I really think that would have taken away some of the legibility and some of the feel for that. So I can't really complain about it too much, but I will say, honestly, I do miss it as well. So it's one, certainly wouldn't keep me from getting one, but that being said, it's something that I know many of you are already aware of and have talked about. The thickness, like I talked about, you know, the thickness on this I really don't think is as bad as the measured specs would make it seem. It actually on the wrist doesn't feel altogether different from the regular Mako V3. So while the thickness certainly is there and it's something that I'm giving as a critique for it, I really honestly don't notice it in actual usage. So unless I'm specifically looking at the profile and looking for the thickness, I can't really actually tell. So that's something to be aware of. And then finally, just the nature of the Traveler's GMT, do be aware of. You do lose the quick set date function, and let's go ahead and actually check out how this works. So pop that open. So now we're in the first position, that's just winding. click to the first click, and now what you actually have is you can see you can move the hour forward. So instead of the quick set date, which you actually have, there you go. See the date actually go through. So you can do a quicker set. You're not fully winding the hand around. You can just pop the hour hand, and then as you go through, but it's just not as nice or as easy. You got to go 2 rotations through before that clicks over, unlike the quick set dates where it's just actually truly going through the wheel. So that's something to be aware of if you haven't had a Traveler's GMT before. So I know a lot of people have been asking for them forever, but that's something that to me is a little bit of a trade-off. So where does that leave us overall? At the end of the day, I'm a big fan of the Mako model. I've owned something like a dozen, if not more, of the different Mako variants. I think this one, it completely lives up to the pedigree that the prior ones had. It's everything I liked about the past Makos. Yeah, it adds a little bit of thickness, a little bit of heft to it, but I really don't think that's too bad. This retains all of that Mako feel while adding the complication that just at the price point is absolutely insane. So it's hard to find a watch in a similar price category that offers these kind of specs. So to me, it's pretty hard to go wrong with this. If you like the style overall, this hopefully has given you a pretty good feel for the watch. I wouldn't hesitate to grab one. So there you have it. I hope you've liked this video. If you did enjoy it, please do smash that like button. And as always, if you haven't already done so, please hit the subscribe button. Helps me out tremendously. Also, drop a comment. Let me know what you think. What are you planning on getting? Are you going to grab one of the GMTs? Are you grabbing a standard variant? What's your flavor? Thanks for watching.